Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to, well, cut through the noise, distilling stacks of information into potent insights and maybe those aha moments designed just for you.
And today, we're embarking on a pretty deep dive into a single, really influential text. It's one that has guided millions, literally millions, toward achieving their biggest goals.
We are talking about Napoleon Hill's classic, Think and Grow Rich, first published way back in 1937.
Right, and this isn't just, a book. It's more like a whole philosophy of individual achievement. It's shaped the lives of some real titans. Think Andrew Carnegie, Henry Ford, Thomas Edison.
It really is remarkable how relevant its core principles still feel, isn't it? Even almost a century later.
Absolutely, and the central promise of the book is pretty intriguing. Hill suggests there's a secret, maybe a formula for success that these giants used.
But maybe that secret isn't exactly hidden. What if it's just sort of waiting to be fully grasped by people who are truly ready for it?
Exactly. Hill himself claimed the book presents the shortest, dependable philosophy of individual achievement ever presented. And that's for anyone pursuing a definite goal in life.
And he's clear, that goal isn't just about money, right?
Not at all. It could be fame, power, contentment, or, just profound happiness. It's broader than just wealth accumulation.
Okay, so our mission for you today is really to unpack Hill's foundational principles and maybe those strategic pillars from his famous 13 Steps to Riches.
Yeah, we'll focus on the practical applications, the stuff that can actually help transform your desires into reality. It's about guiding you not just towards, say, external things, but towards mastering yourself and, well, your circumstances.
All right, let's dive in and see what Hill uncovered. So when we talk about achievement, Hill says it all starts with this one really powerful force, a burning desire.
And this isn't like a casual wish or just some faint hope. He puts it pretty strongly.
Yeah.
Truly, thoughts are things, and powerful things at that, when they are mixed with definiteness of purpose, persistence, and a burning desire.
So it's more than just wanting something. It's, a keen, pulsating obsession for a definite purpose.
Exactly. That intensity, Hill argues, that's the ignition point. That's where everything else starts.
And he brings this idea to life with a really compelling story about Edwin C. Barnes.
Oh yeah, the Barnes story. Barnes had this one single, unwavering desire. He was absolutely determined to become a business associate of Thomas Edison.
Not just an employee, right? That's key. He wanted to be a partner.
Precisely. And think about the obstacles he faced right off the bat. He didn't know Edison personally. He had no money for the train fare to Orange, New Jersey.
Yeah, most people would probably just stop there. Insurmountable barriers, you'd think.
But Barnes's desire was so strong, so potent, that he traveled by blind baggage, basically hopping a freight train just to get there.
Wow. And when he finally shows up at Edison's lab, Edison apparently said later he looked like an ordinary tramp.
He did. But Edison, who was, a pretty shrewd observer of people, saw something else too. He saw this determined expression. And Edison recognized that a man willing to, quote, stake his entire future on a single turn of the wheel for something he wanted that badly, well, that man was sure to win.
That's a powerful insight. True desire kind of makes its own path.
It really does. So Barnes took the most menial work. Edison had a janitorial position. He didn't get his dream role straight away.
But he saw it as a step towards the goal, didn't he? Even cleaning floors.
Exactly. He understood it was a foothold. And his dominating dream, as Hill calls it, of becoming Edison's associate, well, it did become a reality years later.
It's such a powerful illustration. Immense success, starting from, practically nothing but this intense, definite desire.
And this intensity, this level of desire, is underlined by another concept Hill talks about: burning the bridges.
Ah, the warrior story.
Yeah, that ancient tale. A warrior facing a much bigger army. He sails his soldiers over, unloads them, and then orders the ships burned,
leaving no option for retreat, win or perish.
And they won. It's about eliminating any possibility of turning back, creating that absolute necessity.
He gives another example too, right? Marshall Field.
Right, after the Great Chicago Fire, total devastation. Other merchants just saw ruin. But Field, he stands there looking at the smoldering wreckage of his store.
And says he'll rebuild the world's greatest store right there, immediately.
And he did. That store, as Hill notes, became this towering monument to the power of that state of mind known as a burning desire.
The insight there is pretty clear. When you cut off all retreat, human determination just kicks into a higher gear. You find a way or you make one.
So the question Hill implicitly poses to you listening is, how clear and intense is your desire? Are you really truly willing to burn the bridges of retreat to get what you want?
That's a tough question. Really speaks to your level of commitment, your conviction. Okay, so moving from that initial spark, that burning desire, we get to the fuel that keeps the whole thing going. Persistence.
Hill has that famous line, persistence is to the character of man what carbon is to steel. Makes it strong, resilient.
And he emphasizes something really critical. Success often arrives just one step beyond the point at which defeat had overtaken them.
Which is such a vital insight, because temporary defeat, it's pretty much guaranteed on any big journey, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And the natural reaction is often just to quit, give up.
But Hill's research, talking to over 500 successful people, showed this pattern again and again. Their biggest success came right after a point where most others would have thrown in the towel.
He uses another really good anecdote for this. Are you Darby in the gold mine?
Right, Darby. As a young guy, he got caught up in the gold rush, invested heavily, got his relatives to invest.
Put everything into the machinery, worked hard.
And then nothing. He hit what he thought was the end of the gold vein, so he just quit. Sold the equipment for scrap.
And the punchline is devastating, isn't it? He stopped just 3 feet from gold.
Exactly. The junk man who bought the equipment, he was smarter. He got expert advice, a geologist, found out the vein was still there, just slightly shifted, and he went on to make millions.
Ouch. But Darby's story doesn't end there, does it? That's the key part.
No, and this is where it gets really insightful. He learned from it. He called that failure a blessing in disguise because it taught him this incredible lesson about persistence.
He took it into his next venture, life insurance.
Right. He basically turned that 3 feet from gold experience into his personal motto. He told himself, I stopped 3 feet from gold, but I will never stop because men say no when I ask them to buy insurance.
And that resolve, that persistence born from failure, made him a $1 million producer.
It's a fantastic example of how temporary defeat is almost never final if you learn the lesson and keep going. Failure becomes the teacher.
Hill also includes a more unusual anecdote about persistence, the one involving the little colored girl.
Ah, yes, and we should definitely preface this one. The language Hill uses, the social dynamics he describes, they are very much products of 1937. They reflect the biases of that era and, frankly, sound outdated and problematic today.
Absolutely. We're sharing it directly from the source to convey Hill's point accurately, not to endorse the historical context or the language itself.
Exactly. The core message Hill was trying to get across, if you strip away that dated packaging, was about this raw, unwavering power of persistence, regardless of circumstances.
So Darby witnesses this child basically defy an adult through sheer immobility, just refusing to move despite threats.
Right. And the adult, her uncle, known for his temper, eventually just gives up. Darby was apparently profoundly affected by this, wondering about this strange power that allowed her, someone seemingly powerless, to effectively conquer someone superior in strength and authority.
Hill uses it, maybe a bit awkwardly presented for us now, but he uses it to hint at this universal, almost irresistible force that's available to anyone who develops that kind of unwavering resolve.
So, okay, how do you cultivate this persistence? Hill doesn't just say, be persistent, he breaks it down. He says it's a state of mind built on several things.
First, definite purpose. Knowing exactly what you want, that gives you a really strong motive, right?
Definitely. Then, desire, that intense longing we talked about, makes persistence easier. And crucially, self-reliance. Believing in your own ability to follow through on a plan. That fuels commitment.
He also mentions definite plans. Even if they're not perfect, having a plan encourages action and helps you persist because you have a roadmap, something to follow.
Right. And accurate knowledge builds confidence in those plans. It stops you from just guessing, which he says destroys persistence. Then there's cooperation, getting support, understanding, working harmoniously with others. That builds persistence too. You're not alone.
And willpower. That conscious effort to keep concentrating your thoughts on your definite purpose, that directly leads to persistence.
Finally, and this is key, persistence is a direct result of habit. He even says, fear, the worst of all enemies, can be effectively cured by forced repetition of acts of courage.
So it's like building a muscle. You have to consciously work at it until it becomes automatic.
Precisely. And we see this quality in so many success stories Hill mentions. W.C. Fields, losing everything late in life, working for free, getting injured, but sticking with it until he got his break.
Eddie Cantor, losing a fortune in the '29 crash, but using persistence and courage to rebuild an incredible income. Fanny Hurst struggling for 4 years in New York before her writing finally took off.
Even historical figures. Muhammad preaching for a decade, facing banishment, poverty, and ridicule, but persisting until he became this incredibly powerful leader.
The common thread is just that refusal to quit even when things look completely hopeless.
And why do you, the listener, need it? Because, as Hill puts it, without persistence, you're probably defeated before you even start. It's that silent but irresistible power that helps those who keep fighting despite discouragement. It's what turns ambition into actual reality.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly to the mind's inner workshop, where all these plans and dreams start to take shape. Imagination.
Ah, yes, the imagination. Hill calls it literally the workshop wherein are fashioned all plans created by man. It's a powerful place.
And he makes a pretty bold claim. Man can create anything which he can imagine.
It is a bold claim. He suggests there are two main types of imagination. First, there's synthetic imagination.
That's the more common one, arranging old ideas into new combinations.
Exactly. Taking existing concepts, plans, ideas, and reshuffling them creatively. He says this is the one most often used when turning desire into money, finding new applications for existing things, solving problems in novel ways using known elements.
And the second type.
That's creative imagination. He also calls it the sixth sense. This is supposedly a higher form. It's where genuinely new ideas come from hunches, inspirations, maybe even, as Hill puts it, direct communication with infinite intelligence.
That sounds a bit more mystical.
It does. He emphasizes that this creative faculty isn't just passive, it's cultivated. It gets stronger the more you use it and rely on it.
And he gives examples of people who use this power, right? The dreamers who changed the world.
Absolutely. Think Henry Ford. Limited formal education, but he dreamed of a horseless carriage. He didn't wait for perfect conditions. He started with what tools he possessed.
And that dream, as Hill says, now belts the entire earth. Ford didn't just imagine a car, he imagined a whole system of making and selling them.
Then there's Thomas Edison, dreaming of an electric lamp. Famously went through more than 10,000 failures. His persistence was fueled by that imaginative vision.
And Marconi, dreaming of harnessing intangible forces of the ether, wireless communication, radio.
And get this, his own friends apparently had him examined in a psychopathic hospital because his ideas seemed so crazy back then.
Shows how radical true imagination can seem.
Yet Marconi's dream, born from that creative imagination, ultimately connected the whole world, didn't it? Made neighbors out of nations. The scale of that vision is incredible.
The list goes on. John Bunyan writing Pilgrim's Progress in prison imagination, thriving despite confinement.
Oh, Henry discovering his genius as a writer while in a prison cell. Adversity forcing him to use his imagination.
Booker T. Washington, born into slavery, dreaming of education and upliftment for his race, leaving this huge mark through tolerance and an open mind.
Even Beethoven, deaf. Milton, blind. They created timeless art because they could translate their inner visions, their dreams, into organized thought, completely overcoming their physical limits.
What's really interesting is how Hill connects this to the context of his time, the changed world after the Depression.
Right. Writing in 1937, he saw that era of, economic collapse as being incredibly fertile ground for practical dreamers, people who weren't afraid to back their imaginative ideas.
He felt it required tolerance and an open mind because new ideas were desperately needed to rebuild.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it? If a time of great crisis could spark such opportunity for dreamers, then what about the challenges and changes we face today? Could they also hold hidden opportunities for imagination?
Hill really believed that humanity's only limitation is in the development and use of his imagination. He thought we'd only scratched the surface, used it in a very elementary way.
Yeah, he felt we were sort of on the verge of unlocking its true power.
And this leads into one of the most fascinating parts, I think, Hill's personal experience with his invisible counselors.
Oh, that's quite a story. He describes how every night for years he'd sit with his eyes closed and imagine having a council meeting with historical figures he admired.
Like Emerson, Edison, Lincoln, Darwin, Napoleon, a whole group of them.
Right. He called it a voluntary rebirth through autosuggestion. His goal was to consciously rebuild his own character by absorbing the qualities he admired in these great minds. He'd actually address them out loud, ask for their specific insights or traits.
And the really strange part is he claims they became apparently real to him over time.
Yeah, developing individual personalities, like Lincoln always being solemn and the last to leave the meeting. Burbank and Payne engaging in witty banter, it started as an exercise, but it seemed to take on a life of its own for him.
He even talks about Edison showing up early once and giving these profound insights about energy and life secrets.
Whether you take it literally or as a powerful psychological technique, it clearly had a massive impact on Hill. It convinced him that this sixth sense, this creative imagination, works best under intense stimulation, like in an emergency, or through this kind of deliberate, focused practice.
It really speaks to the maybe untapped potential of our own minds to generate new insights if we cultivate it.
Okay, so we've talked about the individual mind, desire, persistence, imagination. Now let's move to a really key strategic pillar that involves other people, the mastermind principle.
Right. Hill defines this as coordination of knowledge and effort in a spirit of harmony between two or more people for the attainment of a definite purpose.
So basically teamwork, but with a specific focus and harmony.
Exactly. And he says it has two main benefits. The first one is pretty obvious, the economic benefit.
You get advice, counsel, cooperation from others. Makes sense. Yeah, he claims this collective effort is actually the basis of nearly every great fortune. His core idea here is that no single person, no matter how brilliant, has enough experience, education, or innate ability to build massive success entirely alone. You need others.
Okay, that's the economic side. But then there's the other benefit, the psychic one.
Yes, and this is where it gets really interesting, maybe a bit more abstract. Hill suggests that when minds coordinate in harmony, something else happens. Their spiritual units of energy, as he puts it, form an affinity.
Creating what? More energy.
Yeah, basically increased thought energy that becomes available to everyone in the group. He uses the analogy of electric batteries connect several together in series, and you get way more power than just one.
So it's like a mental synergy. The combined output is greater than the sum of the parts.
That seems to be the idea, a kind of collective mental amplification.
He uses Henry Ford again as an example here, doesn't he?
He does. He argues Ford's really rapid rise and huge achievements kicked off when he started associating closely with other great minds. Edison, Harvey Firestone, John Burroughs, Luther Burbank.
Even though Ford didn't have much formal schooling himself.
Right. Hill says Ford strategically absorbed their intelligence, their experience, their knowledge, even their spiritual forces through this informal mastermind alliance.
And for a really grand example, Hill points to the American Revolution.
Yeah, he frames the whole thing as a mastermind in action. It started, he says, with a huge decision in the minds of two men, John Hancock and Samuel Adams.
The decision to kick the British soldiers out of Boston, which was, let's face it, incredibly risky, treasonous even.
Absolutely. It required immense faith and courage, not just a casual thought. And that initial decision led to organized planning.
The Committee of Correspondence.
Yeah.
Linking people across the colonies.
Exactly. Hill calls that the first organized planning of the colonists, a crucial step in building that collective force.
And then Hancock and Adams, described as being immune to fear, blind to the possibility of failure. They basically forced the issue, locked their followers in a room.
Until they agreed to hold the First Continental Congress. That act, that definite decision made by that group, the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence.
Each one staking his own life upon his decision to write his name.
That collective act, born from a mastermind, literally created a nation. Hill argues that decision ensured the success of Washington's armies. He believed it gave the soldiers this spiritual power, this collective resolve that just wouldn't accept failure.
It's a powerful argument for how unified, harmonious thinking can achieve things that individuals, however capable, just couldn't do alone.
The key insight seems to be that this unified, harmonious thought creates a force that's exponentially greater than just adding individual efforts together.
So the practical takeaway for you listening is, have you thought about forming your own mastermind group?
Yeah, meeting regularly, talking about your goals, leveraging that collective brain power, experience, imagination. Hill is really emphatic about this. He says, no individual has sufficient experience, education, native ability, and knowledge to ensure the accumulation of a great fortune without the cooperation of other people.
It sounds like an essential piece of the puzzle for any big goal.
Definitely seems to be one of Hill's core strategic pillars.
Okay, so if the mastermind is the engine, let's talk about the fuel, specialized knowledge.
Right. And Hill makes a really crucial distinction here. He calls it the missing link in a lot of education systems, even today perhaps. He says, knowledge is only potential power.
Only potential power.
Yeah. It becomes power only when and if it is organized into definite plans of action and directed to a definite end.
That's a huge point. We often think just knowing stuff is power.
But Hill says no, just accumulating facts isn't enough. It's the application, the organization of that knowledge towards a specific goal that turns it into real power.
He uses that Henry Ford libel suit story again here.
Yeah, perfectly. Ford gets called an ignorant pacifist. In court, the lawyers try to trip him up, prove his ignorance with trivia questions.
And Ford's response is just brilliant.
It really is. He basically says, why should I clutter my brain with all that stuff when I have people working for me who can get me any knowledge I need instantly? He points to the button on his desk, connecting him to his experts.
He knew where to get the knowledge and how to organize it.
Exactly. He argued that any man is educated who knows where to get knowledge when he needs it and how to organize that knowledge into definite plans of action. It perfectly encapsulates Hill's point.
Think about Edison with only 3 months of school, Ford with less than 6th grade. They achieved incredible things not through formal education alone, but by applying this principle.
Right. Hill notes that specialized knowledge itself is actually pretty plentiful and often inexpensive if you know how to find it and, more importantly, how to use it strategically.
So where do you get it? Libraries, colleges, universities, specialized training courses.
Night schools, home study programs. Hill stresses that successful people never stop learning, never stop acquiring specialized knowledge related to their main purpose. It's an ongoing thing.
He makes an interesting point about things being free, doesn't he? Like libraries and public schools.
Yeah, the free paradox. He kind of argues that because they're free, people don't always value them as much. He suggests the effort and cost involved in, say, paying for a correspondence course creates more self-discipline.
Because you've invested something, you're more likely to follow through.
That seems to be his reasoning. He even shares his own story about being kind of forced to finish a correspondence course he'd paid for and how valuable that training turned out to be later precisely because he'd invested in it. It's about perceived value and commitment.
Interesting psychological point. And he really emphasizes specialization, doesn't he?
Oh, absolutely. He declares the order of the day is specialization. He saw employers increasingly looking for people with deep expertise, accountants, engineers, chemists, specialists in various fields.
He gives a couple of case studies too. Stuart Austin Weir.
Right. A construction engineer, his work dried up during the Depression. He was over 40, married. Tough spot. But he decided to completely switch careers, become a lawyer.
How do you manage that?
By taking highly specialized courses. He crammed a 4-year law degree into just 2 years and built a successful practice, not through general smarts, but through targeted specialized learning.
And the accountant story.
Another great example, unemployed accountant. Instead of just looking for another accounting job, he saw a specific need among small businesses.
The mobile bookkeeping service.
Exactly. He took an extra course, learned about office equipment, and created these offices on wheels to serve small merchants who couldn't afford a full-time bookkeeper. It took off. He ended up employing a large staff.
So the key insight again is identify a need, get the specific knowledge to meet it, and then organize that knowledge into an actual plan, a service.
Precisely. The big takeaway for you listening is, don't just gather information. Organize it, apply it, put it to use for your definite purpose, figure out what specialized knowledge you need for your goal, and then actively go get it and use it. That's where the power lies.
Okay, we've covered foundations like desire and persistence, strategies like mastermind and knowledge. Now let's get into mastering yourself, starting with how you market your own services. Hill had a pretty revolutionary take on this for his time.
He really did. He argued the whole employer-employee relationship was shifting, moving away from what he called the rule of gold, basically. The person with the gold makes the rules, a purely transactional approach.
Towards what?
Towards the golden rule. But he interpreted it as a genuine partnership employer, employee, and the public they serve, all benefiting. He saw the public as the real employer in the long run.
He gives examples of this shift, right? Like railroads and stores changing their attitudes.
Yeah, vivid ones. He talks about going from surly, public-be-damned railroad ticket agents to courteous staff, argumentative streetcar conductors being replaced by obliging bus drivers.
Even local grocery stores. The old-time grumpy merchants getting pushed out by chain stores with courteous men who actually focused on service.
Meter readers going from seeming like intruders to being polite gentlemen.
Yeah.
His point was the Depression itself was partly a protest by an injured public against businesses and individuals who were just trying to get without giving.
So the deep insight is that real sustainable success, even when you're selling your own labor, comes from providing excellent service in both quality and quantity, and crucially, with the right attitude or spirit.
And to do that effectively, he came up with the QQS formula: quality, quantity, and spirit.
Okay, break those down. Quality.
Quality is performing every detail of your job with maximum efficiency and always looking for ways to get even better, more efficient. Quantity is the habit of rendering all the service you're capable of and constantly aiming to increase that amount as your skills grow, going the extra mile, basically.
And spirit. This seems like the key differentiator.
It really is. Spirit is about your conduct, your attitude, being agreeable, harmonious, fostering cooperation with colleagues and associates. Hill stresses this. The conduct, or the spirit in which you deliver service, is a strong determining factor in connection with both the price you receive and the duration of employment.
So you could be technically good and do a lot, but if your attitude stinks, you won't last or command top dollar.
Pretty much. You need all three: quality, quantity, and spirit to really secure a permanent market for your services.
This really shifts the focus from just finding a job to proactively offering value. He outlines a whole new way to get employment.
Yes, and it's incredibly strategic. Forget asking, got any jobs, or is there an opening? The absolute focus needs to be on what you can offer.
So the planning process he suggests is quite detailed.
It is. First, decide exactly what kind of job you want. Don't be vague. You might even have to envision a role that doesn't exist yet.
Second, choose the specific company or even the specific individual you want to work for or with.
Third, study them. Really study them. Policies, key people, culture, where the opportunities for advancement might be.
And fourth, analyze yourself. What are your unique talents and capabilities? How can you offer specific advantages, services, developments, ideas that this employer needs, maybe even things they haven't thought of yet?
Then, instead of just a standard resume, Hill recommends preparing this detailed professional brief, like a lawyer preparing a case.
What goes in the brief?
Education, experience, references. He even says get photostatic copies of reference letters, a recent photo. And critically, you're applying for a specific position, outlining exactly why you are the best fit for that role, showcasing your unique value proposition.
It's much more targeted than just sending out generic applications.
Absolutely. And then comes the boldest move, the probation offer.
Offering to work for free initially.
Yeah, for maybe a week or a month, just to prove your value. He argues this shows incredible confidence, and surprisingly often, employers are so impressed they hire you immediately and pay you for that trial period anyway. You've already shown them what you can do.
He tells a story about a woman who used this method for her son.
Right. She prepared this kind of personal service sales plan for him. He landed a junior executive role at an executive salary in his very first interview. Hill estimates it saved him at least 10 years of climbing the ladder from the bottom.
Wow. So this approach basically created a new kind of service, helping people package and sell their skills for much higher positions right from the start.
Exactly. The woman apparently took a percentage of the increased salary as her fee. The core insight is, if you clearly articulate and demonstrate your superior value up front, you can often bypass the slow climb and start much higher.
And Hill was pretty down on starting at the bottom, wasn't
He was quite blunt about it, called it monotonous, dreary, unprofitable, said it kills ambition and leads to getting stuck in a rut.
he? Whereas starting higher.
Fosters better habits, observing opportunities, seizing them, thinking bigger from day one. It's about setting your trajectory higher from the outset by proving your worth decisively.
Okay, so that's about projecting value outwards. But what about the internal battles? Let's talk about those 6 ghosts of fear.
Ah, yes, the internal saboteurs. Hill pulls no punches here. He says, indecision is the seedling of fear. Indecision crystallizes into doubt. The two blend and become fear.
And these are subtle enemies, right? They creep up on you.
Very subtle. And he makes a shocking claim that 98% of people are failures, at least partly because these fears hold them back.
So what are the 6 basic fears he identifies?
Okay, number 1, fear of poverty. He calls this the most destructive. He links it to a kind of inherited tendency for humans to prey on each other economically.
Yeah.
Says it leads to misery, humility. He even suggests many marriages are primarily motivated by fear of poverty, leading to unhappiness.
Number 2.
Fear of criticism. This one kills initiative, imagination, self-reliance. He gives everyday examples. Men wearing hats because they fear criticism about being bald. Fashion trends capitalizing on our fear of being judged. He also warns how parents can really damage kids with constant criticism.
3.
Fear of ill health, often tied to fears of old age and death. It can manifest as hypochondria, imagining illnesses, often triggered by negative thoughts or major life disappointments, like in business or love.
He tells a strange story here about curing someone with love.
Yeah, it's an odd one. A specialist supposedly cures a man's psychosomatic illness by arranging for a charming nurse to basically make love to him. The positive emotion apparently overrides the fear-based illness, leading to recovery and marriage. It highlights Hill's belief in the power of emotion over the physical.
Okay, number 4.
Fear of loss of love. He suggests this often comes from a basic distrust of others. He notes, reflecting the views of his time, that women might be more susceptible, learning that men can be polygamous by nature and untrustworthy.
And he makes that connection between love and motivation again.
Strongly. He claims, man's greatest motivating force is his desire to please women. And that if you take women out of their lives, great wealth would be useless to most men. It underscores how powerful this fear can be.
Number 5.
Fear of old age. Tied to fears of poverty again, loss of freedom, losing physical attractiveness. He also blames cruel religious teachings about the afterlife for adding to this anxiety.
And finally, number 6.
Fear of death. He calls this one useless because death is inevitable. Worrying about it excessively can lead to insanity. His remedy: focus intensely on achievement and service to others. A busy, engaged person finds life too thrilling to worry about death.
These fears, they don't just sit there, do they? They show up in our behavior.
Absolutely. Through definite symptoms. Indecision always being on the fence. Doubt masking itself as excuses, alibis, maybe envy or criticism of others who are taking action. Shows up as constant fault-finding. Maybe spending more than you earn, neglecting your appearance, maybe drinking too much or other forms of intemperance. Over-caution, becoming pessimistic, always waiting for the right time that never comes.
Procrastination, we all know that one. And self-coddling.
Yeah, like feigning illness to avoid responsibility or using minor ailments as an excuse for laziness. The key insight is learning to recognize these patterns in ourselves as symptoms of underlying fear.
So what's the antidote? If fear stems from indecision,
Then the antidote is prompt and firm decision. Hill is adamant about this. He says, we do not worry over conditions once we have reached a decision to follow a definite line of action.
he gives that stark example of the condemned man eating calmly before execution.
Right, because the decision was made, his fate was sealed, worry was pointless. The act of making a definite decision frees the mind.
So the challenge is to make these big, blanket decisions against the fears.
Exactly. Decide to accept death as inevitable. Decide to get along with whatever wealth you have or can create without worry. Decide not to be bothered by criticism. Decide to accept old age as a blessing, not a curse. Decide to ignore minor symptoms of ill health. Decide you can get along without romantic love if you have to.
Just deciding that nothing is worth the price of worry.
That's the essence. He believes this brings poise, peace of mind, and ultimately, happiness. It's a conscious choice.
But then he warns about a 7th basic evil. What's that?
It's not a fear itself, but a susceptibility to negative influences. He calls it a state of mind that creeps in subtly, often from well-meaning people, even relatives. It's like a slow poison, undermining your belief, killing your imagination.
How do you fight that?
You have to use your willpower, consciously build a wall of immunity. Recognize that we're all naturally a bit lazy, indifferent, and susceptible to suggestions that align with our weaknesses. So you have to actively choose to keep your mind closed off from people who depress or discourage you.
Because those negative thoughts take root.
They do. They damage your creative imagination, foster a negative personality, and embed themselves in your subconscious, making them really hard to get rid of later. It's about protecting your mental environment.
He includes that self-analysis test, the 28 questions. That seems pretty crucial for identifying these weaknesses.
It's very powerful. Questions like, have I delivered the best quality and quantity of service I'm capable of? Has my conduct been harmonious? Have I wasted energy through lack of concentration? Do I finish what I start? It forces an honest look in the mirror. It's tough, but essential for self-mastery.
Okay, one more major piece on mastering the self. The transformative power of emotion. Specifically what Hill calls sex transmutation.
Oh, right. This is perhaps one of the most controversial or misunderstood parts of the book for modern readers, but it was central to Hill's philosophy. He starts by stating that the emotion of sex stands at the head of the list of human emotions as far as intensity and driving force are concerned.
It's the most powerful human drive.
That's his premise. He then links this drive to genius. He defines genius in a unique way. A man who has discovered how to increase the vibrations of thought to the point where he can freely communicate with sources of knowledge not available through the ordinary rate of vibration of thought.
A kind of heightened mental state.
Seems like it, and here's the connection he makes. Sex energy is the creative energy of all genii. He argues that you won't find any truly great leader, builder, or artist who lacks this potent driving force.
But just having the drive isn't enough.
No, that's the critical point. He says it must be transmuted from desire for physical contact into some other form of desire and action before it will lift one to the status of a genius.
So channeling that energy, redirecting it.
Exactly. He believed the majority of people misuse or dissipate this force purely through physical expression, which in his view lowers them to the status of the lower animals. The insight is about consciously redirecting a powerful natural energy towards higher creative or productive ends.
This ties into his observation about why men often don't achieve great success before 40.
Yes. Based on his analysis of 25,000 people, he concluded the main reason was the tendency to dissipate their energies through overindulgence in physical expression of the emotion of sex.
So they basically waste this powerful energy source.
That was his view. He observed that most men only discovered how to transmute this energy, channel it into their work, their ambitions, their creativity after age 45 or 50. And that's often when their most significant achievements followed.
It's about harnessing the drive, not just indulging it. He also brings in the influence of women again here.
Very strongly, reiterating that man's greatest motivating force is his desire to please women. He claims that this gives women the power to make or break a man.
And that men primarily seek wealth and power too.
Mainly to satisfy their desire to please women. He even says, quite starkly, that without women, great wealth would be useless to most men.
Again, a bold claim reflecting his time, but it emphasizes the immense motivational power he saw connected to relationships and this core drive.
Right. His advice is to cultivate positive emotions. He believed that love, romance, and sex, when combined and properly transmuted, could elevate someone to the level of a genius. Love especially acts as a kind of safety valve, bringing calmness of purpose, poise, accuracy of judgment, and balance.
And it comes back to controlling your thoughts.
Always. The mind is a creature of habit. You control it by persistently feeding it positive thoughts and emotions and consciously discouraging the destructive ones. He states, when any negative emotion presents itself, it can be transmuted into a positive emotion by the simple procedure of changing one's thoughts.
It's a powerful assertion of mental and emotional self-control. You have the power to manage your inner state.
Okay, let's zoom out now for the final section. Hill takes a broad look at American opportunity and his view on the law of economics.
Yeah, he paints this picture of America offering just unparalleled freedom. Freedom to own property, choose where you live, marry who you want, equal opportunity theoretically for all races, freedom to travel, choose foods, and freedom to aim for any station in life for which we have prepared ourselves, even for the presidency. A land of opportunity.
And he illustrates the sheer abundance generated by the system by what he calls the miracle of organized capital with a really simple example. A 20-cent breakfast in New York City back then.
Right, the grapefruit from Florida, wheat from Kansas, tea from China, bananas from South America.
Eggs from Utah, sugar from Cuba, butter from New England, all brought together, delivered to a modest apartment for just 20 cents for two people.
His point being
that this seemingly simple thing requires stupendous sums of capital and huge armies of trained men. The machinery, the ships, the railroads, the whole infrastructure provided by organized capital.
He goes so far as to call capitalists the brains of civilization, providing the entire fabric of progress.
He does. He argues money without brains always is dangerous. But, properly used, it is the most important essential of civilization. He acknowledges criticisms of Wall Street and big business, but fundamentally defends capitalism as the system delivering this freedom and abundance.
Now, this leads into his critique of what he saw as getting without giving.
Yes. And again, we need to be clear. This is his perspective from 1937, reflecting the economic anxieties and debates of that era. We're reporting his view, not endorsing it as a universal truth for today.
Right. So he criticizes people, he labels radicals, self-seeking politicians, racketeers, crooked labor leaders for taking pot shots at the system.
Specifically, he calls out demands for shorter hours and more pay or government relief without what he considers commensurate effort or giving value in return. He argues this mentality actually prolongs economic depressions because it violates the fundamental law of economics.
Which is basically the idea of fair exchange, value for value.
That seems to be his interpretation. He acknowledges America is a free country where people can live with little effort or even no work sometimes. But he issues a stark warning. Ignoring this law of economics, this principle of giving value for what you receive, eventually leads down a dangerous path, the dictator, with well-organized firing squads and machine guns. It's a very strong, almost alarmist warning about the societal consequences he foresaw from abandoning what he saw as fundamental economic principles.
So for those who are willing to work and apply his principles, he sees America as the ultimate hunting ground for riches.
Absolutely. Offering all the freedom and all the opportunity that any honest person may require. And he points to consumer spending habits as proof of the immense wealth available.
The money spent on non-essentials.
Yeah.
Lipsticks, movies, liquor, gum, razors.
Hundreds of millions even back then. He uses these figures to argue that there's plenty of money flowing in the economy. Vast opportunities exist for those who choose to pursue them by providing value and following the principles in his book. The wealth is there for those who align themselves with service and creation.
Okay, so we've journeyed through Think and Grow Rich, from desire, persistence, imagination, to the Mastermind, knowledge, selling services, conquering fear, even transmuting energy. It's quite a system.
It really is. And that secret he keeps alluding to, it's not really a single magic word, is it?
No. It seems the secret is the integration, the application of all these principles together. Desire, faith, autosuggestion, specialized knowledge, imagination, organized planning, decision, persistence, the mastermind.
Right. He says it's often uncovered and left in sight, where those who are ready and searching for it may pick it up. The profound insight seems to be that the secret isn't hidden from us, but may be hidden within us, waiting for us to activate it through understanding and applying these steps.
So the final call to action for you listening, Hill suggests, is really go back to those first instructions on defining your desire and cultivating persistence.
Yeah, he says the eagerness and seriousness with which you follow those initial steps will be the true measure of how deeply you actually want to achieve your goal.
And we wanted to leave you with one final provocative thought from the book.
Hill suggests, near the end, that maybe our physical senses give us a very limited view of reality, that we might be entering an age where intangible forces become more recognized. He hints that the other self within us, the subconscious or spiritual self, is actually more powerful than the physical self we see.
And that the highest form of knowledge isn't just about getting rich, but leads to this deeper understanding yourself, others, the laws of nature, and finding real happiness.
And this understanding, he claims, comes primarily through developing that sixth sense, your creative imagination, your intuition.
So the question to ponder is, what intangible forces might be present in your life, just waiting to be harnessed by your focused imagination and your faith? Could the very act of seeking this knowledge, applying these principles, unlock a potential within you that you haven't even suspected was there? Could it transform your pursuits in ways you can't yet even envision?
Something to think about. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the really enduring philosophy of Think and Grow Rich. Keep thinking, keep growing.
And keep diving deep. We'll explore more insights together next time.